Hi, this is Pat Sauer with ISWAP. We are in the west central part of the state at White Rock Conservancy. And joining me are
Tom Rosburg, Professor of Biology at Drake University.
Carissa Shoemaker, Director of Land Stewardship at White Rock Conservancy.
So we'll go on a journey here in west central Iowa.
White Rock Conservancy is a nonprofit land trust by Coon Rapids, Iowa. We manage 5,500 acres, more or less, and that includes 40 miles of trails. We have multi-use trails, we have equestrian trails, mountain bike trails. We also manage 3 campgrounds and some rental properties, some houses that you can come out and rent. And all of that kind of reflects our mission, which has 3 parts. One is conservation. The other one is sustainable agriculture. So as you see over here, we manage prairie. We also manage some row crop and small grains agriculture. We lease land to tenants under that, and we rotationally graze. We have cover crops and we no-till in our row crop fields. And then we have another part of our mission, which is recreation and education, which again is reflected by those trails and by the public interaction on the land.
Well, I've been working at White Rock for, since 2004, 2005. I guess that was my first exposure to White Rock. I came out to help them kind of discover what they have here, the 5,000 acres or so, plus other garthland. I did a landscape study, which was basically the goal was to map the extant plant communities and ecosystems here. And since then, I've been back to do quite a few other studies. I've done some work looking for T&E species for the trail system, set up monitoring plots on the trails, set up biodiversity plots. So White Rock is one of my favorite places to work. I think it's, as Carissa was saying, it really is a model, I think, of what we need to be seeing more of in Iowa, which is projects and management that embraces what's called working landscapes. The idea of a working landscape is one in which both people and nature can get along, I guess, in a better fashion. People need to make a living, of course, but we need to also have a way of doing that in a way that's more sustainable for biodiversity. And so working landscape is just this idea that we try to develop more sustainable ways of protecting and using the land in ways, again, that are compatible with biodiversity. And as Carissa was saying here, it's a great model, I think, because the 3 goals here, as she was saying, again, is conservation of biodiversity by doing restoration, restoring prairies, savannas, protecting the wet seeps that are here. The second thing is have to make a living somehow. It has to support that, and so sustainable agriculture is a big focus here, using both cattle grazing and row crops. And then the third thing is education and recreation, I would say, again, with the campgrounds and the trails that are here. So back in 2005, when I did the landscape study, the place that we're standing on right here, which I think is a came, which is a glacial deposit that occurs at the margin of an ice sheet when ice sheets are breaking up and starting to melt back. There's a lot of fracturing that happens in an ice sheet, and so water, basically melting from the glacier, pours into a large hole in the ice, bringing a lot of gravelly material, sandy material, and that sort of all gets piled up into a hill of sorts. That's essentially what a came is, and when the ice is all completely gone, you've got all that gravel and sand. So what we're standing on here is sort of like that. It's a very gravelly, sandy deposit. When I was mapping the plant communities here, this whole area that we've been looking at here, where you can kind of see the dead grass, is pretty much all covered with pine trees. Pines have been planted here by the Gars as a way to provide wildlife habitat, I suppose, or I guess the Christmas tree idea was there too. And I worked my way through the pines trying to figure out what else might be here, remnants, and I got to the top, but you really couldn't see the top, and lo and behold, there's a remnant prairie up on top of this cane, a very dry mesic to dry prairie with even some western species, because again, it's such a dry site. So I described that to the guards in my work, and suggested that this is a good site for restoration, at some point. And over the years, they've been working at removing the trees. The trees are all gone now, and now Carissa is involved with actually trying to get some prairie back out here. So maybe she can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is an ongoing project. As you see, we're very much in the middle of it. We have some cost share through Guthrie County via the EQIP program, and that covers brush management, it covers burns, some herbicide application, and then planting. So we've done our brush management. We've burned the past 2 seasons. We burned in the fall and then in the spring again, as much as we could get fire to carry. And then we did our first pass of herbicide down below the remnant. So as Tom mentioned, there's a remnant up there, a very special remnant. And I think since he scouted it out in 2005, it's kind of been creeping down the hill. So it's expanded. So we tried to give it quite the buffer when we were spraying so that we didn't spray any of the remnant. We also had to be very careful about wind direction because it's a hill. So any direction is a little tricky. So we were really careful about the conditions day of, and careful about the herbicide that we used. We didn't want residual. We did 1 pass, and we're planning to do at least 1 more pass, probably in the fall, depending on what's coming up in the meantime, before we do a frost seeding this winter. We're also hoping to supplement the seeding with EQIP with another program so that we can get a more expansive and diverse seed list going, because it is such a special space. We want to try to source some remnant seed from nearby, and as well as some other seed grown just within the county or Carroll County. So yeah, it's again been a process. We've been working with Tom Rosburg and John Jetson with Diversity Farms to come up with that seed list and kind of see what's going on and make a management plan. We're trying to take our time and really take care with this project because we want to do it right. We've had a lot of experience over the years since we were founded in 2004, and we did a lot of reconstructions and things. We learned a lot over the years with guidance again from our friends and staff members, and we learned that you should really try to do it right the first time. Really helps with management from then on. After we get this established, of course, we're going to do some maintenance mowing, which is a little tricky because there are a lot of rocks and holes and stumps here, and then eventually we'll burn it again, see what else comes up.
Question for you. So you talked about the rocks and holes. What kind of excuse me, what kind of mowing equipment would you use in here?
You probably have a brush, like a rotary mower. Is that what you usually use?
Yeah, so we have various equipment. We have like a pole behind on our gators. We also have a smaller DR mower, and then I think we have a whip mower, brush mower. Okay. We would probably use one of those slightly bigger rigs, probably maybe the pole behind. I think that may be what was used before, but I think to be determined. Mm-hmm.
Well, as Carissa was saying, this is a tricky site because, again, of the really dry nature of the top over there, and that's the remnant again. And then moving down, of course, as you move down the slope, the soil moisture conditions are going to change somewhat, and so you get a little bit more mesic environment as you get lower on these slopes. So having a seed mix kind of pays attention to that, utilizing more mesic species lower on the slope and drier species as you move up the slope. That would be an important part of trying to, again, get the prairie going here. The stuff that you see out here right now, the green stuff, mostly all forbs. There's common milkweed, there's climate ground cherry, there's some world milkweed I'm seeing, there's some horse nettle, it looks like. A variety of forbs that, well, either they've come up since the come back from the spring, because you probably spray glyphosate here, I'm guessing, probably, to do the initial burn down and kill. And you can see all the brome is at least top killed at this point. Is that the second spring? Have you sprayed just once?
Just once.
Just once, okay. So,
well, We did once, and then we had missed a little patch, so he did
Okay.
come out and fill it back in, and then we did have to hit the black locusts again. We had a
Right.
little stand of black locusts, and they started suckering from the roots again, so we did have to spray those second time. But no, one pass really.
Okay. That's the advantage of, again, taking time to make sure that stuff that you do see get top killed with an initial spraying, to make sure that it's actually dead, because again, a lot of times stuff will come back. So there'll probably be some spot spraying out here, I suppose, at least to try to push back on some of the weedy stuff that we see here. You know, you're in a position here where, you know, some of this stuff is probably fine to have, like the milkweeds, but it's hard to. There's other stuff in here that really needs to go too. So there, I think there's some. I saw some shrubby stuff coming up too. So
There's a little bit of buffalo burr. There's some honey locusts, which are native,
Honey
but
locusts,
we don't
yeah.
really want them in the
right, they're not-
mix.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
honey locust right over here. Yeah.
Yeah, we were just debating about that. And this area also has some nicer species than, as you get over there into the low spot, like Tom was saying, it's wetter over there. So we have reed canary grass, and we definitely don't want that in our prairie. So we will probably do another pass of glyphosate, but we are thinking about clethodim and targeting grasses instead, and just targeting the brome and the reed canary,
With
depending on, yeah, because some of these also are just annual disturbance species that with mowing and management will be tempered down.
So the lower area down there is really green with a lot of fords, I suppose, weedy things. I don't see much grass, but that's going to be planted too?
Yeah.
Or is it just the slope of the hill?
No, all of it.
All of it, this whole
Yeah.
area will get planted.
Actually, we're
So-
planting even the ditch. We're planting to the
Oh.
road. We talked with the county about planting out the ditch just to make sure it's all the way.
So you really
protected.
will need a multi kind of level mix here. You've got the really lower areas, which are more of a mesic prairie site, looks like, for the most part, and then the lower slopes and then the upper slopes.
Right. There's even a little ravine sort of thing coming through an ephemeral gully that comes through the property, so it does get pretty wet down there. So yeah, it's quite the variety. As we make our way up the hill, you'll even see there's just straight gravel and sand, like Tom was describing, because of the glacial activity, and then down there we have the loamier soil types. So.
Well, we'll quick go over and take a look at the top of the cane. All right, we're standing on top of the cane here, and this is where the remnant is best observed and seen. This is the part of the cane that was the driest because it's the highest, and I think probably just in terms of, you know, suppression of tree growth, woody growth, trees did not grow well here, so this part really survived very well. And it's a really important prairie remnant because of the dry nature of the cane, the really gravelly soils. There are western species here, again, that come in from the west, and in some cases, you know, are maybe some of the few populations, not the only, but some of the few populations that occur this far east. Some of the species that we see here, just looking around, here's the lead plant, which I'm sure many of you know, just done blooming. There's showy goldenrod, just coming into bloom right here. There's one that's just starting to bloom right here. And then of course there's a coneflower here. We can see all the dried heads of all these coneflowers. Just really nice population throughout this prairie here. And I have to confess, I'm not 100% sure which one it is, because there's two possibilities. There's the pale purple coneflower, which is, you know, widespread across Iowa and will grow in pretty dry areas. But there's also the possibility that this is the western purple coneflower, Echinacea angustifolia, because of the really dry nature of the soil and the proximity we are to western Iowa and the Great Plains. I know for sure that there are Echinacea angustifolia populations that come into about the western 1/3 of Iowa, but they're going to be limited to growing on just the most driest sites. They're not going to be able to grow really well in a more mesic site. The way to tell them apart, we can't really tell them apart for sure right now, although these leaves are pretty narrow, would be to have the flowers and look at the flowers, at the disc flowers, and see what color the pollen is. Echinacea pallida has white pollen, and Echinacea angustifolia has yellow pollen. I'm thinking there's a pretty good chance that this could be angustifolia, just the way it looks. So that's a pretty significant, again, western species growing this far east into the state. I know there's some hairy grama here, which is a short grass, you know, when it gets about that tall or so. I'm not seeing any right at the moment, but I know there's some here. What else do we have here? There's a lot of aromatic aster. I can point to some right here near Pat. Right here, there's a little patch of it into this area. And of course, most of the grasses are little blue stem and Cydos grama, probably some western wiregrass, Minnenbergia cuspidata. That's another western species. So a really important remnant that is looking better, I think, than it was in 2005. There's no doubt that it's looking better.
All right, we're finishing up here and we're gonna head down to River Campground, which is nearby some of our best seeps. So those are little wetlands that have really high quality vegetation that Tom will talk about. All right, so we're standing here on Fig Ave Bridge. This is by River Campground. And we're looking at the Middle Raccoon River here. It winds its way through White Rock, and as it winds its way through, it's buffered by mostly native vegetation and some cool season plant community pastures. While we do row craft, they're set off from the river and again buffered, whether it's through remnant vegetation or CRP. And we kayak and canoe when the water is high enough. Right now it's very low. We also try to monitor water quality out here. We work with the Iowa Soybean Association to take samples. We've been doing that for a few years here. So we have some good data on that and some of our tile lines. And on some of our creeks as well that feed into the Middle Raccoon. So it's pretty neat that we get such a sizable river out here, and it feeds in eventually into some of the water in Des Moines, the drinking water. So another reason to stop here is significant. As you can see, the seeps that we're just about to talk about, these are wetland plant communities that are fed by probably a groundwater, a perched water table, and also recharged by rainwater. You can kind of see the pink vegetation in there. That's spotted Joe pieweed, some liatris, and there's also some yellow flowers, and there's some ferns that we'll again see up closer. But they're these patches that are fed by water coming down under this hill here. They usually come off of the bottom of these hills, and they're trickling through either cracks in the sandstone or through the sandstone, and they're meeting these impermeable barriers of clay or other bedrock, and then coming out, outletting kind of onto these slopes here, onto the floodplain. So they don't look quite like the wetlands that we're taught to think of, like cattails and depressions. Not all of them are depression. I've actually seen some convex seeps out here. So again, we'll see that closer, but there's some of our more unique remnant systems here, some very, very cool plants.
Well, here's one of the best seeps at White Rock. This is again near the campground. Just north of the bridge on Big Avenue. Really large, long area of seep that comes again off this hill slope above us. Lots of wetland plants in here. We're looking at some sensitive fern here in front of me. The species right here. Spotted Joe pieweed. Flat top aster. This one right here. Some of it in bloom right here. Here's some bone set, Equatorium perfoliatum. I'll walk it a little bit further and see what else I can find here. Here's some dark green bulrush. Equisetum, the horsetail, growing underneath this other vegetation. And here's some Virginia mountain mint in bloom right here along the edge. Some New England aster right here, getting ready to bloom. So a really good mixture of wetland species, wet prairie species, There's, I know that there's some marsh marigold here. I've seen it blooming, really nice patch of marsh marigold in the spring. There's some turtlehead here, a good mixture of wetland species, many of them fairly conservative. I would describe the wet seeps, especially these larger ones, as probably the most pristine plant communities that are still here. And by that I mean they would have the highest floristic quality. There's a variety of sizes, and so there can be some that are fairly large like this one, and this one is probably approaching at least a half acre or so in size, if not more, to smaller ones that are the size of a house or something like that, even a bit smaller than that. But they always occur in the lower slopes along the major stream here, which of course is the middle fork of the Raccoon, or some of the smaller streams that feed into the Raccoon. So they're on those lower slope positions.
All right, so we're standing near one of our timber stand improvement projects. Like I said earlier, we have about 2,000 acres of timber, and it varies in canopy cover. We're trying to get a lot of it to savanna, which is up to about 30% or so. People differ on that canopy cover. And then we also have some oak, hickory woodlands out here as well, some dry upland woodlands, and then some different communities down by the river. But we're in one of the drier areas right now. It slopes down to a creek. And it was historically savanna, so we're trying to restore it to that. It's been a process. I think we hit it pretty hard 2012 to 2015. We came in for a series of years, and we're trying to remove a lot of the softwood species and a lot of the cedars and honeysuckle, just cut them to the ground, and then we were trying to pile up and then burn piles and then come up with some prescribed burns afterwards to reinvigorate the vegetation and continue to clear up the trees so that it's back to the trees that are supposed to be here and the understory that's supposed to be here. And as you see, as Pat's panning around, we have had some encroachment of honeysuckle again, and then some other aggressive species like raspberry and brome. So again, since we haven't really done too much work in here since 2015, things have grown back up. We have been burning. We did burn this spring in about 1,000 acres, and this timber is about 85 acres that we were working on with the timber stand improvement. So it did get burned, and you can see that in the stumps around here, but you can also see that the honeysuckle did not burn. So we are going to eventually have to come in and mechanically remove it. In the past, we did those sorts of projects. They're very labor intensive. We did them with staff and also some service members. So we've had AmeriCorps and CCC come through. We recently got some Green Iowa folks who came up and did 1 or 2 day projects, and then we had some service members here for 3 to 11 months. And we've also used the Iowa-Minnesota Conservation Corps in the past for some of our work and collaborated with some of our neighbors as well. So it's been kind of piecemeal with the labor and with the funding sources for this work, and that's why we really prefer burning in terms of efficiency and cost efficacy. But sometimes you got to get in there and mechanically remove some of these species. So we definitely have a lot of honeysuckle to tackle around White Rock in particular.
How many acres a year do you try to burn? Do you have a rough?
Well, this last spring we were very aggressive because the fall, the weather was so weird. We didn't burn much at all. We burned 12 acres here, 7 acres there. We didn't burn very much at all. So in the spring we actually burned over 1,000 acres. I think usually we average more like 600 or so. Trying to keep some habitat unburned for, the early season bees in the spring, and we also have to work around some other species like the Blanding's turtles and the Indiana brown bat. But yeah, we have a pretty big burn program here.
Prescribed burning is a very important tool out here. I know that when I did my work in 2004 and 2005 and got sort of initial idea of what the plant communities were here and how things were and what the plant species were, I know basically after that, White Rock did probably kind of intensify their burning as a result of that. And I came back in 2011 or so to do some surveys for the trails, which were being put in. They came a little bit later, 2011, 2012 is when I did the threatened endangered species surveys. But I noted that just in those roughly 7 years or so, that quite a bit of difference was present on the landscape, and I attributed it to the burning. There was a lot more openness in the forest understory. quite a few of the woody species that were somewhat of a problem in dense, like prickly ash, pretty fire sensitive species, and those were really a lot less. So the understory was opened up pretty well, and in fact I think I could say that some of the prairie areas that I saw in 2005, they actually had expanded somewhat, and had moved out and taken over some of those areas, at least started to encroach in some of those areas that had been burned a lot. So I agree. I mean, fire is a very important tool here, and especially important in these areas that you're trying to push back towards savanna. And this area here, again, I think is really right on target in terms of the canopy. Looking behind us here on this slope, yeah, it's right in that range of 10 to 35% canopy cover. The understory is not completely what, of course, we'd like to see here. There is the brome. We can see the brome around us here. That's what this is right here. That's a cool season grass, of course, that got established when this was used for grazing. But there are prairie species that occur around here. So there's this prairie population remnant component. There's some lead plant down the slope over this way. There's some rigid goldenrod scattered about here. There's some gray goldenrod. And there's some big blue stem that's starting to head out over there. So, I think burning will help keep pushing back on the brome and helping to favor the prairie species. And the honeysuckle is the next project probably.
So how many staff do you use for burns? And you talked about 600 acres. How many staff and or volunteers are you typically using?
For these burns?
Yes.
It depends on the size of the burn and also the topography and the fuel. It's because some of the smaller burns, even if we have a hill and there's no visibility, even though we use walkie-talkies, we might still have a bigger crew. But this last season, we probably averaged 10 to 11 person crews. And we did a lot of staff this year because some of our volunteers are getting a little older and not able to come out. We were about an hour from Des Moines and an hour and a half or so from Omaha, so not too big from population centers, but it's still hard to find regular volunteers to come out. We did get a few new volunteers too, though, especially some college students who wanted some fire experience. So some of those crews, we would have 6 or 7 staff members, and then the rest would be volunteers. And we do still have some regular ones in town too. Our smallest burn was probably 7 people. For what's that in terms of acres? I think that was only a 16 or 17 acre burn, but we still felt we needed a decent crew for again, visibility reasons and the fuel. It was a savanna with some baby oaks and then a lot of really dry plant communities going up a steep slope, so we knew the fire was going to climb. And so yeah, and we run a few gators or UTVs on each side and a few ATVs on each side. Usually there are at least 2, probably a 4-seater rig on each side and a 2-seater rig on each side, and then the 4-wheeler. Then we run usually 2 drip torches, and we circle the burn out slowly, letting the fire kind of burn against the wind, and then we eventually close it up, and then it burns with the wind. And then
a ring fire.
Yeah, it's a ring fire. Completes the burn. And we also sometimes have people on foot we don't usually use the water packs as much, but with flappers and things. So.
And have you used AmeriCorps, Green Corps staff at all on any of your land management?
For the land management or for the burns?
For land management.
Yeah, for land management, definitely. And even the burns, I think we've used Conservation Corps for, and maybe Triple C before. Sometimes the timing's a little rough for some of these programs. Again, with these, we try to burn in the spring and the fall, and we've also experimented with summer burns, but sometimes if we apply for them to come at a certain time and then we don't get the weather, we're not able to use them for some of these land management activities, or even some of our brush management might get rained out, for instance. But we have used them quite a bit in the past for invasive species mitigation, brush management, and then we actually had an NCCC crew this last time that wasn't focusing on that as much as they were mapping for us and assessment with some GIS tools. So yeah, it's been kind of a mosaic again of labor. We used a lot on the CAME as well. We've been using, and a local volunteer group has helped with some of that brush management too. We've we've made our way over to one of our wetland easements. It's over by the Burr Oak Visitor Center off of Highway 141 over here. And you can see it's starting to come in with some native plants, which Tom's going to talk about, but this is one of our older plantings. I can't remember if we reinvigorated it with some interseeding or not, but we have been trying to burn it more lately to try to improve diversity. I'm really curious to see the results of a recent study. We had a master's student coming out and doing some bird surveys and vegetative surveys, following up on a study that was done in 2009. So it'll be really interesting to see if we have a measurable improvement in the floral and faunal diversity and quantity out here too, based on the visible improvements we've seen.
There are a lot of forbs blooming right now. If you can just get a pan back in the background here. In the foreground here, there's some Baldwin's ironweed. There's some sweet coneflower right in here. Lots of partridge pea right through there. There's some rattlesnake master blooming right here. So white wild indigo plant that's hiding behind these sawtooth sunflowers right in here. Some wild bergamot over there, a little patch of it. I can see some Canada milk vetch, a plant right over that direction. And there's some blazing stars blooming further back. So it looks like things are coming in pretty well here. There's a few grasses as well, some big blue stem I can see there, but mostly right through here it's mostly all forbs.
So the WRP program, I think it goes by a new acronym now, but that was the Wetland Reserve Program, and it's an easement with the NRCS. So this land here is protected in perpetuity, whether White Rock or not in the future. It's always going to be in conservation, and it's monitored by the NRCS, which is part of the USDA.
Is that managed any differently the way you would manage any other land because it's under a federal program?
A little bit. It has some restrictions on it, I would say, and then by its nature as a wetland, we have to think about different species and the timing of some of our management. But yeah, the WRP contracts sometimes come with some provisions like you can hunt on it, but you can't usually establish really permanent trails through them or have vehicle traffic or anything. So some of our recreation's impacted or restricted on it, and then our management, we had to drop some compatible use agreements with the NRCS early on to outline some of our management strategies. So we've continued up the trail here toward Coon Rapids, which is the nearest town, and we're actually connected to Coon Rapids through our trail system. We have a loop that runs through it, and then we connect into some of their city parks. And you'll see here, as Pat panned by, you saw some fruit trees. So this is one of our unique environments where we have a trail, and then right next to it, we were able to plant some apple trees and cherries and a few other varieties. We're now working on moving them back from the trail a little bit to give a bit more clearance, or by tree spading, bit by bit, making sure that we don't lose too many trees in the process. But it's pretty neat that we're able to have fruit out here, which the public can pick. We welcome them out there to do that, and sometimes we make cider here as well. And then we also have some vegetative buffer again before this ground meets the middle raccoon, which we're still following here on our trail system. You saw on that sign that we've gotten some funds from Trees Forever and one of their partnership programs, and then we also have some EQIP money and CRP money in here.
Okay, we are in Coon Rapids, so the trail links into town. We're going to head back into the White Rock Trail. So had a nice visit, a little tour through the city, or the town.
Now we've made it to what we call our home farm district, or the very edge of it. So you saw, as Pat was panning, some of the infrastructure around some of our bison paddocks that we graze with our bison herd. We have 18 now. We're looking to reduce that number just a little bit because they do very faithfully reproduce every spring and fall out here at White Rock. We had one calf this spring. So they are very happy. We got some rain this spring, so good growth in our pastures, and sometimes you can see them from the trails out here. Pat just tried to zoom in. They're out in the distance laying down, and the grass is pretty high, but you can see them again sometimes from our trails or from an adjacent road. And then we also have some of our leases down below that you'll pass on our trail out here, some cattle grazing, some goats, some sheep. Yeah, so again, quite the diversity. And then you see this is also one of our overlooks with a really nice vista that shows off some of the nearby farmland and prairie reconstruction that we've been working to improve. We're here at White Rock Conservancy at our iconic bluff. That's our namesake. You see this layer of Cretaceous sandstone in here. That's kind of white with some red. Part of the valley here has a whiter looking sandstone and part of the valley has a redder looking sandstone. So again, that's where our name came from, White Rock. We're a 5,500 acre land trust. We're a nonprofit, a 501c3. We were founded in 2004 with a big land gift from the Garst family. And we've been managing a very diverse landscape ever since then. We have a lot of savanna or aspirational savanna. Tom will talk about this a little bit later, but a lot of it's woodland based on the canopy cover. But bur oak savanna is what we're aiming for because that's what was natively here in the valley. We have some remnant prairies. We have some reconstructed prairies. A lot of CRP acres, about 1,000 acres of CRP, about 2,000 acres of timber. I think about 900 acres of prairie, and then we also manage some farmland. We manage about 800 acres of row crop and about 1,200 acres of pasture, 200 acres of hay. So again, a lot of different landscapes going on here, a lot of different practices. I think one thing that makes us unique here at White Rock is our nonprofit status, and another thing that makes us unique is our three-part mission. So we focus on restoration and conservation. Those landscapes I was describing, that habitat, we're trying to preserve it and also make it better. But we also demonstrate sustainable agriculture here in Iowa, one of the biggest ag producers in the nation. We demonstrate at-scale row crop with no-till practices, cover crop, erosion control structures, and then with our grazing systems, we rotationally graze as much as possible, and we also interseed with legumes for nitrogen. We manage that with tenants. We have cattle, sheep, and goats that graze on these acres, as well as our own bison herd that grazes on some pasture. And then our third part of our mission is recreation and education. So within this landscape, we have 40 miles of trails, and they vary in terms of use. There are some multi-use trails that are hiking, mountain biking, equestrian, and UTV that we rent. And then there are some equestrian-only trails and hiking, and then mountain bike trails. And then we also have 3 campgrounds. We're standing in one of them, River Campground. We have Starfield Campground to the south, and that one's known for stargazing because we're in one of the darkest spots in Iowa. We really value dark skies out here as well. And then we have Oak Ridge Campground, which is one of our RV campgrounds. And interspersed among these places are some rental houses as well, some Airbnbs that we rent out.
This gives you a look at one of the other habitats out here at White Rock. We've been looking at a lot of areas where savanna restoration is underway, prairie reconstruction, a lot of forest environment here. There's 4 kinds of oaks out here. Usually bur oak is a dominant species, a lot of bur oaks right in this area. There's also a fair amount of black oak. Black oak is common, especially on sandy soils. Then there's going to be some white oak and some red oak as well. This, again, they've been doing a lot of burning here, so you can see that at least in this area here, there's a fair openness to the understory. We can at least see through it quite a ways. Other places we've been driving through, there's more raspberry. That can be a problem sometimes when you start opening up the understory with fire, is that other native species, shrubby species like raspberry, take advantage of that. There's sprinkling of sedges in through here, good plant to have again to promote fire. Pat's showing you some sedges, quite a few different species of sedges right in through here. They're all vegetative right now, so I can't really tell you what species they are. Other things that we're seeing here, another one that kind of does respond well to fire is this hog peanut. This is an annual species in the Fabaceae or legume family that comes from seed each year. So when burning is done, that does help to promote the germination of seed and help promote it then. There's some wild rye here, silky wild rye, a good native grass for these types of forest environments. White snake root and white avens, a couple other species here. So this is what a forest looks like here. All right, we're stopped here at one of White Rock's larger prairie reconstructions up here on top of a hill. Carissa, when was this planted, do you think?
I believe it was planted around 2009 through the CRP program. So it had formerly been row cropped, which it has to be to qualify for the CRP program. It's the Conservation Reserve Program through the NRCS. So that's how we had the funds when we first planted through cost share, and then now we get a payment every year from it to put it into prairie.
Do you know anything about the seed mix?
No, I don't know much about it. I just know this was one of our later plantings, so we had learned a lot from our initial plantings here at White Rock, and we had adjusted, I think, a little heavier on the forbs.
That's always a challenge, I guess, and always a question, how to get the forbs and grass balanced to look like a real prairie. This one looks like it's not too bad, maybe just a little bit heavy on the grasses, but again, we can go out and look at native prairies that aren't much different than this too. So there's a good selection here of forbs. You see these tall cuppa plants here in front of us. There's some rigid sunflower right here in front of us, right through here. Some gray-headed coneflower. I can see some heads of pale purple coneflower back there. There's a bunch of Lespedeza or round-headed bush clover as well. There's some rouse stick master back there. So must have been a pretty diverse mix. And you just burned it, I think you said, this spring?
Yeah, we burned this part of it. Pretty sizable burn, because in total this prairie is about 350 acres. So we burned this side of the trail. We used the trail as one of our fire breaks, one of our burn lines. And then we had burned the other side of the trail, I think, the year or two before that. So we try to break it up again into these manageable sections.
Do you usually try to do just spring burns on something like this?
We favor spring burns for grassland, but we do try to diversify to foster different species through the seasons. It's definitely a little harder for us historically to get a fall burn on a prairie done in the right weather window. Right. But yeah, we often do spring burns, and that's what we did this last time, was a spring burn. We would maybe try a summer burn on something like this, if not for the ground nesting birds and also the CRP requirements, which don't allow you to do a lot of maintenance from the, May 15th to August 15th or May 1st to August 1st, when there are a lot of ground nesting birds. So you do have to work around those requirements.
Right.
But yeah, we can definitely see the flowers are up, and the duff that we burned off, there's not much residue down here after the burn.
There's nothing really.
This burn went really well too. It was a really slick burn. This is one of those bigger ones, like I said, that we had like 11 or 12 people on, big crews that split up again and went around this big circle. And we actually took it in 2 different segments just to break it up so we could have lunch. And
right. Yeah, this is a big chunk to burn all at once, and I'm sure you get some pretty intense flames here, especially in the spring. It's a lot of fuel load here.
Yeah, we did have some very tall and intense flames where we had to back up because it was so hot. Yeah.
And Carissa, what do you say in closing remarks about anyone that may want to come out and visit?
Closing remarks. Well, you've seen through this video, we covered a lot of ground. I know with Pat's editing magic, probably will seem like we just took little snapshots, but again, it's such a big piece of land with so much diversity, and you saw different land uses. So yeah, I would encourage you to come out and try to see some diversity for yourself. Look at some of our ag systems and our native habitats, especially if you can find something that you don't have as much exposure to, whether it's the wetlands or the prairies or the timber. But I'm constantly amazed. I've been here a little over a year, and I drive around and I notice new things, and I'm also like, this is my new favorite spot. No, this is my new favorite spot. So there's just a lot to see here. I would encourage you to come out and cover as much ground as you can.